Okay, do we want to start? Thank you. My name is Dennis Ostick. I have the privilege of being the chairman of our town's Economic Development Connect Communities Committee. Exactly. And I now open the public information meeting for Broadband Expansion Project on October the 16th, 2019 at 6:05 p.m. Can we begin by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for attending this evening. Really appreciate it. First order of business is I need to read the public notice. Public notice is hereby given that on Wednesday, October 16, 2019 at 10:30 a.m. and Wednesday, October 16, 2019 at 6 p.m. the Economic Development Connect Communities Committee of the Town of Boulder Junction will hold a public information meeting at the Boulder Junction Community Center in the Boulder Lake Room. The purpose of the meeting is to allow information to be presented regarding the expansion of affordable and high-speed internet in Boulder Junction Township and to answer public questions and comments relating to this topic. The public is encouraged to attend and participate in the meeting. A quorum of town board members and other town committee members may be in attendance at this meeting for information gathering purposes only. And no town board or town committee action will be taken at this meeting. So, our Economic Development Committee and the Broadband Task Force has been working on and engaged in meetings and discussions concerning the possible expansion of affordable broadband internet in our town. Thank you for attending and participating in this process. I'm now going to turn the meeting over to Bill Nemeth, who really knows the details. Bill is retired from Kimberly-Clark, 30 years, spent with Kimberly-Clark, 34 years, and your position at the end?
I was Director of Global Security and Corporate Air Transportation.
We are really glad to have you here in Boulder Junction, Bill.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Dennis.
Join the crowd.
I thought you were going to tell everybody the details.
No, you're
okay. Okay, all right. Thank you. All right, good evening, everyone, and thanks for spending your lovely October evening with us. So we're going to expand on some of the information that we've given you back in August. And I know that there are some new faces here. We had a good session this morning with about 40 folks who attended. And we're giving you the information that we have and that we know. It's not entirely encapsulated yet. We're still, every day, we're still getting a bit more information. But this is the latest and greatest for you. So this is our agenda. We this morning we went for a good strong hour with presentation material. We did have some question and answer going back and forth. We then kind of transitioned then to a bit of a feedback session, and then we took more questions, and we were pretty close to 2 hours. So hopefully we can shorten that up a little bit this evening. We'll see how it goes. Wanted to first off tell you kind of about this broadband journey and give you a bit of the story as to why we're all here tonight. This really all started from Boulder Junction back in 2017 when the Economic Development Connect Communities Committee, we're getting good at that, sent a survey to the residents of Boulder Junction. And one of the questions was to ask, what is the economic challenge in Boulder Junction? As you can see, the number one answer was the lack of broadband or internet access. So that's why we're here. That's what kind of kicked off this entire project. Milestones. We really go back to October or November of 2018. That's where this kind of journey started, if you will. And it started with some information gathering in October of last year, but really, and pointing at the top bullet point, really got going because the EDCCC started focusing on this issue for Boulder Junction. Information collection and lasted throughout the rest of 2018, and in February of 2019, we had our first public information meeting. CenturyLink was here, I think helped educate all of us as to what our current capacity is, but then really what the potential is going forward, and really the options. So that really started it. Dennis and others started sharing information with the town board that same month, and that's continued every month subsequently until the present. In April, the Broadband Workgroup, the task force Dennis referred to, was formed. Between the three of us, and there were other folks who were kind of in and out, we've invested over 800 hours so far. So this has been a significant undertaking for the township. We started, and Dennis will talk more about this in a little bit, but we started stakeholder engagement. Because as we're talking with the State Public Service Commission, their advice was, you gotta get support. And specifically about grant funding. But it just makes sense to get that support. In May, we had the then director of the Wisconsin State Broadband Department here, and that was an open meeting, and we had really good information, and she gave us just tremendous amounts of advice about how to get broadband into your community, how to do the right things to enhance your success of getting PSC grants. That took us to July. So as you can see, between July and October, we've had a lot going on. So we have received, I would say, a good amount of publicity from the Lakeland Times. That really helps kind of cement that support piece. Governor Evers, in the 2020 and 2021 budget, signed authorization for $48 million in grant funding. That is up from $14 million over the last biennial budget. So significantly more money, and Boulder Junction has the opportunity to share in some of that. We surveyed the existing fiber in the township. I already mentioned the August 2019 public information meetings, and then in September, we sent requests to suppliers of broadband services for estimated costs and conceptual plans. And we'll tell you about those tonight. The PSC issued their 2020 grant application guidance, and in order to file, the filing needs to be received by them by December 19th at 4 p.m. So if we're going to file something, it's going to be filed before that, obviously. And then Boulder Junction was awarded telecommuter forward certification, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. October. We're here. We have some numbers we're going to share with you this evening, talk with you about the submittals we received, and we're in the public information meetings. Here is here's our telecommuter forward certification. That's just a piece of paper, no question about it. But what it shows is that Boulder Junction is committed to be a telecommuter community. And that's a step to getting grant funds to support whatever project, if there is one, that Boulder Junction chooses. It's an important step. And we did the right thing by getting it. So let's go back, and those of you who attended the August session saw a slide similar to this, but it's really important that we address these areas because, you know, the end goal is not just getting broadband in this community. If we did that, nothing else, let's say we probably failed. These are the reasons why this project is essential. So number one, broadband gives you the opportunity to market the community to young families, to entrepreneurs, to new eco-friendly businesses. That's step two. Once we get these folks here, then that creates new businesses that support those new residents who come in, support those new businesses which come into the community. Because of that, it helps stabilize and diversifies the economy. I think we see the streets here. We know that most of the economy here is driven by tourism. And one of the things that we also know is we are in a sustained period of growth, about 10, 11 years now. That's not going to continue forever. And when the economy does go into recession, what happens with the traffic? It does go down. So we tend to get these peaks and valleys, and having a different type of focus on the economy does help stabilize and diversify our economy. Teleeducation. We have heard again and again how teleeducation is happening today for our children, and how schools are leveraging it more and more. They're leveraging the internet, they're leveraging the cloud. So students, when they have internet access, when they're home, they can continue to learn. They can do their homework when they're at home or in the evening, but they can't do it if they don't have access to the internet. And that's one of the challenges here with the school. And that puts those students at a competitive disadvantage. Keeping us in our homes longer. If you have some gray hair like I do, hopefully you have more hair than I do, telemedicine is really, really taken off in the last year. So what does that mean? That means that through video and audio that's connected to the internet, you can interface with your doctor, a nurse. They can diagnose based upon your symptoms and based upon looking at you, having a conversation with you, and then prescribes medication perhaps, or advise you to seek to go to a urgent care clinic or another, go see your doctor and to get advanced care. This area, I would think, and based upon what the medical clinics have told us, over the next 5 years, that is really the way most of us are going to get that initial triage of medical care. And then finally, property values increase. So Dennis and I attended a meeting yesterday that was sponsored by the state of Wisconsin Public Service Commission. And it was surrounding what to do if you submit a grant application. And like any meeting, you know, you get a lot of other information, and Forest County shared a very interesting statistic. And they said that when there is broadband that comes in the community, that increases property values 6%. If you look at that as a $200,000 home, right there, immediately, there's a boost to the economy, and really a boost to each and every one of us. The other interesting statistic, and this came out of a Vilas County study, has to do with people who may be part-time residents. We have a lot of those here, seasonal residents. And in Vilas County, 37%, or excuse me, those part-time and seasonal residents would spend 37% more time at their places if they had access to appropriate broadband. Because why? A lot of people work remotely. They work from home. Well, if home is here, they can spend more time here. And I can attest to that because we were in that position for over 15 years. I think I missed something here. Just bear with me. No, we're good. So what can you do with fiber optic high-speed broadband? I was thinking about this because the first internet-connected computer that we got was in 1991. And at that time, you connected to your telephone line. You had to put some keys into your computer. There was what was called a modem sitting there, and you essentially dialed up. And it was really cool because your speed was 14.4 kilobits, all right? That was a while ago, but not so long ago. And so I've been doing this for a long time, but I thought as we were putting this together, I thought we need to do some research to see what else you can do with high-speed broadband. So number one I have on there is you can now watch TV. And we have a cable provider in town that we understand is leaving Boulder Junction on October 30th. So there's going to be a gap there, and somehow that gap is going to need to be filled. This is a way to fill that gap, just a basic gap. You can watch videos for pleasure, for learning, for education, for research, for study. You can run any business, and especially businesses that move data back and forth. And that is becoming more and more common. It doesn't have to be a high-tech business. It could be a builder. It could be a designer, because they're constantly moving large files back and forth, drawings, photos, presentations, things such as that. You can also communicate via voice and video. So FaceTime, Skype, those are all methods that we use to communicate that don't use a landline telephone or a mobile phone. It provides a more interactive experience. We already talked about telehealth. You interface with your healthcare provider. You can bank online, buy absolutely anything. And some of that stuff you really need, or you actually need. Use the cloud for data. So many of us, if we don't run a business, have traditionally kept our data on our computers, either a laptop or a desktop. Some of us have used our own servers in our homes for data. What the cloud does is it provides a home for that data that's not in your home. It's somewhere else in a large data center. The largest provider of that today is Amazon Web Services, AWS. So instead of keeping your data in your home, where it could be stolen, it could be lost, many of us don't back stuff up like we should. When it's on the cloud, that's all done for you. This cloud-based data repository, in the next couple of years, it will be everyone will use it. You can sell products and market services. And I would think that as you look at this space, at this area, we're seeing just a revolution on how services are marketed especially. Because we're in a time with everything that most of us have known over the last 20 years being totally turned. It's just like the entire economy. Folks especially the younger folks don't want stuff, they want experiences. It's the same thing with the marketing of services. Interactive gaming, you probably heard the term gamers. This is where folks are on one end in Boulder Junction and somebody else is on the other end in Jakarta, Indonesia, and they're gaming. And that requires huge amounts of data. Working remotely. More and more organizations are being open to allowing their employees to work anywhere they want. It also allows them to recruit employees anywhere in the world, because quite honestly, it doesn't matter where you are today. If you're internet connected, you could be providing services to a company in Milwaukee from Buenos Aires, Argentina, and it happens constantly. It creates opportunities for those companies to then look globally to recruit their employees. Smart bikes, exercise machines, where you interface through video with a virtual gym. Peloton, you've seen the bikes and the video on the commercials. That's become very, very popular. Smart devices, your thermostat, refrigerator, security systems, cameras, open doors, turn lights. Start your vacuum. So these iRobot vacuums, these little robot things that go around and sweep your floor, you can be grocery shopping and get a call from somebody and say, I'll be over in 2 hours. Well, you can take your app, turn on your iRobot, click it, and your vacuuming will start. It seems a little space age, but that's where we're at. And then the bottom line is really anything else you can think of, and then there are things that we don't even know about that are coming tomorrow, but the common denominator is we all need high-speed broadband connectivity. Okay, here's a report that we received in September. And what it says is, research report, broadband availability raises market value of rural homes. And this is especially critical because we're not sitting in the Milwaukee metropolitan area. We're sitting in rural Wisconsin where the access of broadband isn't prevalent. And we don't like to think of this as a competitive situation, but let's face it, right now it is. So if one community can get broadband access and the other doesn't, and you need it, what community are you going to go to live in? Okay, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about our supplier contacts and responses. So these are the suppliers that we have reached out to over the last several months. Almost all of them have replied in one way, shape, or form. 2 have replied positively, okay? And we'll go into that more in a little bit. So Dennis is going to talk about some of the stakeholder engagement that we've been involved in over the last few months.
Thanks, Bill. I'll be brief. The most important stakeholder is you. You are the key to the success of our town. Never lose sight of that. Your involvement is a key. And we'll be asking you further in this meeting how you can become more involved and what's necessary in order to support something here in our project. But for example, this morning at our meetings, Brent Jelinski, the superintendent of North Lakeland, was here. He's been at every meeting we've asked him to attend to express the importance of fiber, high-speed internet for North Lakeland School and the students here in Boulder Junction. He will go anywhere to indicate that it's of utmost importance to continue the stability of that school. Also this morning, The president of the community food pantry was here. And the food pantry board of directors have already submitted a letter to our town clerk indicating the strong support of the board of directors because they know that it will help their clientele. The introduction of real high-speed broadband will assist their clientele. We've met with Marshfield Clinic. Their director of telehealth, telemedicine, visited this building during the early summer to indicate to us that telehealth, telemedicine is of the future for the provision of medicine in rural Wisconsin. They've already submitted their letter of support to the state of Wisconsin in support of the town of Boulder Junction. We've reached out to the radio stations who have been very supportive in communicating the meeting dates for our meetings, and we thank them for that. Our community groups, whether it's the Lions or any other community group, we've been meeting with them to express the project and ask for their support. Land Lakes. Bill will speak about this. Big fiber project going on in Land O'Lakes now. One of their town supervisors visited, been very helpful in providing information of how they've attained fiber to approximately 600 premises in Land O'Lakes, and they're all in. And he's indicated because of that, they now have a thriving business, a call center business, the direct result of bringing enhanced internet to that town. Once again, the most important stakeholder is you. You will play a role in any success that this project and our town will have. Bill?
Thank you, Dennis. And it's important to understand that these things take a while to develop, these projects, because they're pretty significant. At the meeting we attended yesterday, there were counties and townships there. Some of them have been at this for 5 years already. And you know, it takes some time. So Dennis mentioned Land O'Lakes, and they started, they submitted their first grant in 2016, and they're going to be working through 2020. So it took them a while just to, we got to learn so much. And that's why all of these stakeholders are important, and you are as well, because we need feedback, and we need to continually learn what your feelings are, what your needs are, so we can then formulate the best options we can for you. Okay, let's go back to our providers. We received 2 proposals based upon our estimated costs and conceptual designs, and that was based upon fiber optic cable to the premises. Only received 2 responses, and you know, we had a slide that was full of companies, okay? It is what it is. We received 2 responses. We had 2 working objectives, and if you attended in August, you saw these. Number 1 was to create a broadband business district, the 3BD, which provided 1 gigabit or more to a downtown area. Really, the business area, if you will. That was working objective 1. Working objective 2 was to provide a minimum of 25 megabits of service everywhere else in the township using fiber optic cable. There are a number of ways to deliver internet access. But as we're standing here today, fiber optic to the premises is the best, most efficient, and fastest way to deliver that. There are some other technologies that are being studied. Some hold some promise, But fiber is really where it's at today and into the foreseeable future. All right, so here's where we get down to brass tacks. Our cost estimates. The first one we'll address is CenturyLink. And CenturyLink is our current, for the most part in the township, it's not every place in the township, but in most places in the township, it's our current provider. They told us they could put in fiber to every premise for $7.5 million, and they could do that project next year, the whole thing. ChoiceTel, which is a Eagle River-based fiber broadband provider, which provides services in just to the northwest of Eagle River, and then they've recently expanded into Land O'Lakes. Next year, I think, will be year 3 or 4 of that project. They're still trying to tie them up. And then a smaller project in St. Germain. That's their coverage area. They told us, and we didn't get a lot of data or a lot of detail from them, okay? We got a number that said that it would be $2.6 million, but they could not start the project until 2022, and it would take them 2 to 3 years or more to complete it. If they would outsource the fiber optic trenching, so all this stuff has to be trenched into the ground, they may be able to complete the project in 2022, and they thought that that cost would be something like $6.1 million. Steve went back and asked them for some additional information based upon our 3BD, and they told us that they don't have time at this moment to give us any additional information. So that's where that is. Yes, sir.
Just, if you're getting to this, that's later, that's fine, but what is the average grant size for communities of this size?
Well, I'll talk about that. I'll talk about that in quite a bit of detail, because we got some really good insight yesterday. Okay? All right. So the focus, what we wanted to do is focus on CenturyLink and some options with CenturyLink. Because number one, they're our current provider. Through federal tax dollars, they have invested in 62 miles of fiber optic cable in the township of Boulder Junction, and they spent about $3 million of that, of federal money on that project. And they can complete the project in any time. So we've really looked at 2 options here. And you know, there are all kinds of options, but we're looking at 2. One is to complete the entire project in 2020. So this would be fiber to every living unit, we'll talk more about that, in Boulder Junction in 2020. The other option is to complete it over a period of 2 to 5 years. And there is a 2020 project we'll show you in a moment that would be about $1.9 million, and it would concentrate the service in 2020 into the area which would give us the highest return on investment. Because remember the goals here. The goals here aren't to plant fiber in the ground. The goal is to enhance our community and enhance the economy and to provide a competitive situation for our children and to give us telehealth and to increase our property values. Those are the goals. And I will point out that none of these cost estimates include any supplier contribution, nor do they include any grant funding. Steve will talk about that in a little bit. So here's part of that option 2, and this would be to provide fiber optic to every living unit, and there are 341 of them in this shaded area. So it's the fiber optic cable to each living unit. Let's just take a tour. We're sitting right here in the community center. So this area would be from the corner of M and Marsh Road over to the east and include the area that the township purchased from the DNR last year, 2 years ago. It would go north then to the Lutheran Church, up across and then over toward Little Rice Lake, over and then back up to County Highway M, and then coming back around. This is the southeast corner of Boulder Lake. Come around to the area of Camp Manitowish, back around, crossing County Highway K. Here is the county garage. Back down, and then this is Marsh Road, and then connecting back to County Highway M. There are significant residents in here. We understand there are 50 or more students who live in this area. And that is 341 living units, which is any dwelling, any place, could be a business, could be a residence. And the price tag there is $1.5 million. This is the other piece, and let me explain this. That 62 miles of fiber CenturyLink put in the township with government funding, for the most part, can't be leveraged because they didn't put in many of these things called access points. And the access point is essentially where the fiber comes in. It's a series of mirrors and additional fiber cable so they can take it to your residence. Okay? So what this project is about is adding those 28 additional access points, and what I'm calling it lights up that existing fiber. It makes it work for us. CenturyLink believes that there are at least 200 additional living units that would benefit from this project for a price tag of $420,000. So those are the two 2020 projects that we believe provides us the best bang for the buck if we carve the township into phases. So what does this look like for you? If you use DirecTV, Dish, Carbon cable today, you're paying between $60 and $120 a month. If you use HughesNet, Carbon, or Verizon Internet, you pay somewhere between $60 and $120 a month for that internet service. Okay? It's no wonder why we don't have any money. The cost of CenturyLink high-speed broadband, this is fiber broadband, most folks, and I'll show you a slide that depicts this in greater detail, but would be between $50 and $65 a month. Streaming services. Who uses streaming TV services in here? Okay, percentage is a little bit less than what it was this morning, but a few. How a streaming service works is it's something that you go on to the internet, you sign up for, and then you can connect your computer, your tablet, your smart TV, even your phone, and watch television. There are a few of the providers here. They're Hulu, Fubo, Sling, AT&T TV Now, Philo, Netflix, Sony PlayStation, and YouTube. And there are others out there. That cost is anywhere between $60 and $55 to $60 a month. And this area is volatile. These are kind of, although I started using Hulu more than 10 years ago, it was free back then, you know? This area is still shaking itself out, but it will be the way that the vast majority of us access our television into the future. Probably what, about 30% use it now. 5 years from now, it's probably going to be more like 80% or 90. All right. Okay, one more slide, and Steve's going to come up and really go through the numbers. And this took some doing, but we received this detail from CenturyLink on their service and their costs. So let me start over here with the residential standalone service. So it starts up to 15 megabit. I don't know who, you know, this is fiber optics, so you can have a lot of speeds here. This is a pretty slow speed. You could probably stream some television or Netflix content with it. You can visit websites, you can download email. All the way up to 1 gigabit for $85 a month. When we looked at that, I think it's safe to say you're like, boy, that's pretty good. We could have that. That's pretty reasonable. This is not symmetrical, which means that if we have 100 megabits of download, we're probably having 10 megabits of upload. Okay? That's the difference, that's the primary difference between these two packages. The business package, if you select 100 meg, you're going to get 100 meg down and 100 meg up. That's the big difference, because businesses generally need that symmetrical internet back and forth. Okay, Steve, take us through the rest of the numbers, please.
Okay, so we have this broken down by project here. So on the top, you can see we have the downtown project. As Bill alluded to, it's 341 LUs, or living units, at a cost of almost 1.5. CenturyLink will contribute $220,000, and that leaves us, if we get a grant, left with $625,000 roughly. And that would be for the downtown project. The other one is the 28 access points, which is 200 additional customers, cost of $420,000. CenturyLink will contribute $80,000. If we get grant funding, the grant would do $170,000, and the town of Boulder would do $170,000. Now, one of the things that is included in the downtown project is what's called the GPON equipment. The GPON equipment is what makes the fiber work for all of us. So if you were to today go to CenturyLink and say, I want to run fiber to my business, it would be $1,000 a month at least. And what that would be fiber running from your business all the way to the backbone of the internet. That's dedicated service, and it's super expensive. The GPON equipment allows us to share the fiber, and that's what brings the pricing down. So we're going to put the GPON equipment in, and they threw that in with the downtown project. So that's $150,000 of that money is putting in that equipment. And what that allows too is anybody along the fiber line with a 385 exchange could potentially get fiber. The existing access points, they wouldn't give us the number because I don't think they actually know. But there are access points that they put along the existing fiber in certain locations when they bury them. We don't know exactly how many are out there, but that would be another point where people could connect to the fiber at no cost. We don't know exactly where those are. The other things that act as access points are what are called nodes. And a node is used with the DSL. So we all pretty much have DSL at our homes now. So we're connected to a node. The node takes the copper that runs to our house and allows it to connect to the fiber. So anywhere there's a node, we would be able to hook into that at no cost. Now CenturyLink has one caveat. That's if you're within 600 feet of the access point. So anybody over 600 feet would have to pay an additional cost per foot to get it. So if you're 800 feet, you'd have to pay for 200 feet of area. But we don't really know what this number is here. It could be well north of 716, but we don't know that because they haven't engineered it yet. So that's where we are with that. Total number of living units in Boulder Junction is a hard one to come up with. That's any potential customer within the township. We're using 1459, we think it's close. Covered by this project is going to be roughly 50%. So when we looked at this, we said, you know what, we can cover 50% for a lot less money than we can cover 100% for. So, yes, sir.
Just to clarify, the downtown project was what you showed on the map earlier? Or
Correct, yep.
Okay.
Yep, that's the downtown project. Yep.
What about the 28 access points? Is that separate from that map?
Yes, those are 28 access points that are, it's a great question because the parameters that CenturyLink used was anywhere along the fiber line where there was 5 or more residents within 600 feet of a potential access point is where they placed those 28. So between those, the nodes, we wish we knew exactly how many customers was covered, but we don't. Until it's engineered, we won't. The other thing that's important to note is that anybody, once we put this GPON equipment in, anybody could get a group of people together and say, you know what, we'll foot the bill for this. We want to hook onto the fiber, we want to do that. So you could have your own project with CenturyLink if you wanted to. If you weren't included in this first phase of it and you really needed to get it, you actually could. Any questions on the financial piece?
Steve,
Yes.
you said they're 62 miles an hour.
Yes.
Where are they adding?
I think it's only would be in the downtown area, Jim, and I think they told me it was 10, which seemed like a lot. That was in the initial meeting we had with them. They said they were going to add 10 miles of fiber, which I guess that's plausible, but it seems to be like a lot. So they're not adding any except for in the downtown area. Yes, sir.
Once this project is all said and done, what's the half-life of it? When will this need to be reevaluated and new product put in?
The life of fiber optic bill is what?
35 to 40 years.
35 to 40.
I guess I'm mainly going for, is there any sort of estimate of when technology will upgrade past that? Because I mean, computers nowadays, 3 years, you're done with that computer, gotta get a new one.
Yeah, we ask that question a lot, and nobody seems to think that there's much past fiber. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't continually increase the speeds of the equipment that runs the fiber. So the fiber has potential to carry faster and faster and more data. But beyond fiber, as Bill alluded to, I don't think there's anything that anybody can see in the near future that can compete with it. But none of us can look into the future because everything changes so fast.
If you're really interested in that, MIT is working on a transmitting data on light in the air. And it holds some interesting promise because they've been able to test it kind of in a vacuum. I think this summer they were going to be testing it in the city of Boston to see if that would work. So that's kind of the next thing that might come, but it might not.
Yes.
That 51 remaining, is that like for 21, 22?
Well, it's hard to say. One of the things that we did here, I think, was we picked the low-hanging fruit, right? We said, okay, how can we cover the most amount of people that we can cover for the least amount of money, right, and get grants for it. So that's kind of how we looked at this project. That means that we know that the other 50% are the challenging 50%, right? So we're really exploring ways to handle that. There's CAF 3 funding, which is the Connect America funds, which is that $3 million worth of fiber that we have in the township presently. That was put in using CAF 1 and CAF 2. CAF 3 is coming in a couple of years, and one of the reasons we chose the project that we did is CAF funding is driven by speed. And so if CenturyLink was to say, okay, we're going to take CAF funding and we're going to deploy it in Boulder Junction, there's minimums that they have to provide. And when we did it with CAF 2, it was 10 and 1. And so if we look at the town of Boulder Junction, the majority of it has 10 down, 1 up. And that is because of that, right? They said, okay, we're going to provide 80% of the community with at least 10 and 1. So when the next grouping comes along, they don't know if it's going to be 25 and 3, it's going to be 50 and 5, they're really not sure. So if we look at the town is really pretty well served relatively. There's a good chance that the CAF funding wouldn't apply to downtown Boulder Junction, nor would it apply to areas along the existing fiber because they're already pretty well served. And so the CAF funding would really be beneficial to Boulder because it would reach out to that other 50% that's really, really hard for us to justify getting to because it's very, very few houses a long, long way from the fiber line. So for instance, if we look at South Trout Lake, Man Lake, Muskellunge Lake, that area down there is very problematic. We got a quote from CenturyLink, it was around $600,000 to handle 63 people, right? So we're going, as much as we'd like to help them in this first phase, it just doesn't make a lot of financial sense to do so. Are we gonna forget about them? Absolutely not. Our goal is to make sure that they get it. But for a first step, it just didn't seem logical.
So is the whole first phase to be completed in 2020?
Yes, ma'am, yep.
The grants are pretty significant, 50% of the cost, it looks like. What's the level of certainty that you can get those grants, and how do they come out to be 50% of each, 50% of the cost?
Well, that's the maximum that they'll do, and that's what we're gonna be going for. I think that we're cautiously optimistic about it. I think we've done a lot of really good things to ensure that we're gonna get the grants, but there's absolutely no guarantee that we will.
Is that the one that has a deadline of December 19th?
Correct. And that's two. There's one this year and there'll be another next year.
Are those state or federal?
Those are state. Yeah, the federal is that's the CAF funding, and that's down the road.
Okay. That'd be great.
Greg?
But on the flip side, you're also asking the 743 that are not covered to potentially fund the cost.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so that's where, we had that question this morning, and, there's gonna be surveys that you guys are gonna get, you can look and fill out the surveys, but it's clear that some people find that that's inequitable. Now, if we think about DSL that we have now, that is extremely inequitable. If you happen to be near a node, you have really fast internet. The further you get from the node, the slower your internet gets. And so right now, it is a really unlevel playing field that we're dealing with now, right? Just depending on where you live, it's gonna determine your speed. With our project, we firmly believe that we're gonna be able to carry the whole project out. Is there a guarantee? No. But, if anybody, I think, logically looked at this project, hopefully they would come up with the same solution that we did to say, this makes the most sense as phase one. Are we forgetting about the rest of the people? No. And at the same time, you have to look at it and say, well, next year then, the people that already have high-speed internet, why should they pay to have the next round of people get it, right? So hopefully everybody can look past that and say, you know what, this is the best thing for the community, and we all need to do it because it's best for Boulder Junction. In the end, we're all going to get it, and we're all not going to get it at the same time, but that's just reality.
Well, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but one of the options on the table is if you feel strongly, there is the option to do it next year. That's an option. It's a lot of money, but it's an option.
I'm sorry, you're referring to the $7 million.
Yes.
Is there any kind of estimate on, so if it's 2 to 5 years and those outliers are the most difficult to do, is that 5 million? Is that 10 million?
Well, 7.5 is the whole project, right?
Well,
so
if you do it in 2020.
It could go up. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no question. So there is a risk to waiting. There's no doubt about that. And really, whether it takes 2 or whether it takes 5, I think we're still kind of formulating what we think gets us the best value and gets people to service as quickly as they can. It's a lot of data coming at us all at once, and we're really trying to make the best recommendation we can. And I don't think we're necessarily through fine-tuning our recommendations, but this is as close as we've gotten. And if we did do this, I think it's a good thing for Boulder Junction, but I'm not saying that this is the end-all for this year. We're still able to fine-tune this thing a little bit. So, and a lot of that's because of you guys' input, right? We know that there's a lot of people that are saying, you know what, there's value in doing this whole thing at one time. In fact, last week at this time, CenturyLink had a number of about 5 million that they threw out there. So for 5 million, we were going, well, for 5 million, maybe it's worth the town coming up with 2 million. If CenturyLink will throw in 1, we can get a grant for 2, we come up with 2, let's just do the whole thing. Then it went to 7.5 and it made us step back and go, yeah, in 1 year, that's an awful lot to bite off. The other thing we have to be mindful of is, heretofore, the Public Service Commission has only awarded a grant of $800,000 on the top, right? That has been their highest grant. Now, granted, there's a lot more money in the pot now than it was, but how high they'll go, we don't know. I think asking them for 2 or 3 million in one shot might be a stretch, you know, but again, we're trying to gain as much information as we can on that so that we can get a grant. We'd hate to go in with something too high and not get it. You know, that would be a failure on our part. So we're really trying to be judicious as to how much money we ask for.
Do you have any sense on when they're going to be looking at these grants? You talked about we might not get it, but would they just simply decrease the level of the grant, or would they throw out the whole request?
You know, I'm not sure on that one. You guys went to that meeting yesterday. Did they talk about that?
Pardon me, the PSC has done both. In some instances, they've reduced the amount from the applicant's request, and in many instances, the PSC has said, nice application, we can't give you anything this year. In fact, that was a word of warning that Angie Dickinson, who was the director of the state broadband office, indicated to us at the May meeting when she was here in this room. She said, don't be offended if your grant request is denied. So those are the conditions we're operating under. And there's no inside information to be had here. So we're trying to put together the most reasonable, cost-efficient project for this town that will ensure the success, the continued success of the town, the school, our medical facilities. That's what's at stake. What's at stake versus trying to grab something that may not be attainable. We've got a lot at stake here.
Now, one of the things to think about too is
to do 2 grant submissions, or is it solely that you can only do 1 grant at a time? So in other words, you say, well, my option A is I want to cover 80% of the people. My option B is I'll cover.
Right. You can file multiple grant requests. Now, whether that's the most logical thing to do for year 1, we're going to consider that. But multiple grant requests can be made, so long as they're separately identified.
So one of the things to note is if you do get 1 grant, so we know that there's a grant coming this year, there's another grant coming next year. If you do get a grant in year 1 and you apply for the grant in year 2 to complete the project or to further the project, you have a better chance of getting a grant than other people do that haven't done that. At least that's what we've been led to believe. So it would make more sense likely to at least break the project into 2 pieces and say, okay, let's get half of it this year and do the other half next year. We'd have a better chance of getting those 2 grants than we would just 1 big one.
Just curious, the CenturyLink contribution piece, is that something you guys have negotiated with them? Are they willing to move on that? I mean, they've already sunk cost into 62 miles of cable or a fiber that they receive federal funding to do. So they presumably, and they're still more expensive than the other company who's going to do it from scratch.
Yes, clearly. No, we've been, you know, it's kind of hard because you don't have a ton of leverage, right? And so we wish we had 12 providers that were in here vying for this. The reality of it is other companies like Frontier and who knows who else. Spectrum, right?
AT&T.
We
went to that.
Yeah, we were willing to pay, you know, a great deal of money to have them bring fiber to town, and none of them would do it. And so, you know, that's the unfortunate piece of it. Do we feel like we're getting a screaming deal from CenturyLink? No. We have talked to them at length, and you know, they've tried to convince us that it's, you know, that it's a good deal, and they have costs that are buried, et cetera. But you know, we're well aware that it's not a screaming deal. But if you do a little research on it, it's not outside the realm of what other communities have paid or other individuals have paid.
Well, and I think it's an important piece to understand that we're kind of comparing walnuts to pumpkins here between a small local provider and what are they, the 3rd largest telecom internet provider in the United States. And it's different. And there are benefits and risks on both sides. And you know, we gotta look through that and figure out what the best course of action is for Boulder Junction. Jim, I think you.
Just in your meeting with the gentleman from PSC, did you get a sense of what the level of competition for this grant money might be, or get a sense of the interest of other communities?
Yeah, and it's probably a good way to kind of segue into that. So yesterday, the meeting was held at Nicolay College, and I, got in there, and there were cars parked all over the place, and I thought, boy, this meeting is gonna be just unbelievably attended. Walked in, and what was it, probably about this side of the room, just not many people. And we got some information that suggested that, boy, people aren't coming to these things. And now, let's keep in mind that last year there was 14 million, or the last biennial, there was 14 million. This year, this next 2 years, it's $48 million. So we heard it 3 times yesterday. We got a lot more money. We got a lot more money. So, you kind of evaluate what you're hearing, and you look at people, they got a lot more money. Right.
Done and Bradstreet review of CenturyLink. You said they're top 3 in the country, but it looks like we got potential putting all our eggs in one basket here. What's their long-term future?
Well, if you do some internet research, you'll find that it's rumored that their consumer business is for sale. This is their consumer business, okay? You'll also find similar rumors about Frontier, okay? Merge, purge, and submerge in the corporate environment. That's part of that risk package. And then we look at, the other respondent, small company, privately owned, 2 people who really run the company. It's a risk there too.
Obviously, just whoever buys it wouldn't dump it, services taken care and run, or is that?
Well, and we don't know, because their CFO responded to that and really didn't provide an answer. We don't know. We don't know, but what we do know is in that environment, and it doesn't matter if it's Spectrum or if it's AT&T or if it's TDS, their focus is on businesses and urbanization. That's where the money is. The money is not in providing internet service to people in a residence. Or if you've got a apartment that has, 5,000 people in it, that's money. Corporations will go for the money. And that's what they do, to please their shareholders. And probably quite a few of us have mutual funds, so we're shareholders. We want those returns, just the way it works.
And I will say, if we invest, and CenturyLink invests this money into fiber in the ground in Boulder Junction, the chances of somebody not picking that up if something ever happened to CenturyLink would be very small. Their system will be a lot more valuable in Boulder than it is now.
And that's really a good point for your point, Julie. It's like there's an asset here. If somebody would buy it, they're going to be looking at those assets. So, quite state of the art.
And I don't know if it's important to mention, Bill, the fact that, and Steve too, what the proposal from CenturyLink, fiber to the premises in Boulder Junction, is that a different strategy for them?
It is. That's not their go-to-market business model. Their go-to-market business model is that type of service to businesses, but they don't do that for consumers in rural areas. They said they'll do that for us. So
And
this would be a first of a kind for them and a model for other communities.
And that information absolutely floored the people from the PSC who learned that yesterday. They were completely amazed that the town of Boulder Junction had been able to reach out to, contact, and obtain this type of proposal from CenturyLink. It hadn't been done.
No. So we're kind of paving new ground. Greg?
Yeah.
What do you?
Dennis, you've repeated numerous times in conversations I've had with you, affordable and reliable. So have you had conversations with them about the reliability of the system?
Well, one of the things you can look at is that in general, fiber is going to be more dependable to DSL because it's not as equipment intensive. A lot of the areas, like an access point does not require power, where a node does, and all the equipment downstream of that, there's just much less of it, so the chances of an outage will go down. From there, it's just an issue of where the outage is, right? So if there's an outage, downstream or upstream, there's just nothing we can do about it. Hopefully we'll be more dependable. The only true way to get true redundancy is to have another provider or another technology completely. At Coondale, we use cellular as our redundancy. It would be nice, especially for businesses, if there was a true redundancy we could get, and maybe one of the other technologies will provide that, because I think it would prove challenging, I think, to try to get somebody else to plow fiber into Boulder Junction just to attain redundancy. Now, having said that, as part of the comprehensive plan that covers the whole township, there's a line that will run all the way down M, then it will go down N to 51 and connect with that and go up north. And so what happened to us this year, the outage we had, I believe it was in April, over by the county garages when somebody was moving snow, we were down for like a day. That would have been mitigated because that traffic then could have been routed around the lake the other way. But that's not to say that there wouldn't be another pinch point where it could go out and we would lose service.
Let's go with you, sir.
That's why you asked about why would they contribute $220,000? Well, then this is the model, and if this model is successful, then CenturyLink has an example and say, you build a home and you want other people to look like what the home looks like, here's the model we built. So they're contributing $220,000 because if this is a successful model, they can advertise this and they'll get the $220,000 back in our.
Yeah, and that's the key. And so let's we're going to take one more and then we're going to move on because we got some additional information and we need to get some of your feedback and then we'll do some more Q&A. Yes, sir.
Have you looked at successful models that are similar to this, such as like in Trumbull County with Tri-County Communications? We've done fiber to the house.
We've looked at Bayfield. That's been our kind of model. So Bayfield County has fiber to most of the living units there. They use 4 different providers. Bayfield's a unique place. I don't know how many of you know too much about Bayfield, but most of Madison has places in Bayfield, so they've got some connections.
And if anybody cares to see what fiber looks like, there's a strand.
Be careful with it though.
Yeah, don't open it up,
You wanna go
because
through
we've been
this.
warned you don't want to get a piece of the glass in your finger, it'll never come out.
Let's take one more.
Just
and
real
see-
quick, just to confirm, when you're saying to the premises, they're gonna take the fiber to the building, not to the driveway, right?
That's correct.
Right.
Yeah. So kind of where your telephone line comes in today, it'll be that fiber optic cable, and then the other part of this solution is what's called an optical network terminal. It's a box kind of like that, has the brains in it to transfer the light into data. And from there, you plug your LAN cable, your router, and then your telephone into that box. So let's do this and.
Yeah, we're going to look real quick at the impact on the taxpayer. Now, kind of keep in mind that these numbers could change based on how much money we want to borrow. At least it's kind of a baseline that we can use, and you can extrapolate whatever number you want out of it. So the first one would be the $800,000 if we were to do the project that we're suggesting, and we were to get grant funding. We could take it out 17 years, and the cost per thousand would be 15 cents. Obviously, at 1.6 million, if we just double that. So what does that mean to the average property owner? $100,000 property. If we borrowed $800,000, it would be $15 per year. 1.6 would obviously be 30 on the high end. $500,000 home, it would be 74 a year. 148 on 1.6 million.
So those are the numbers, and then we're gonna talk a bit more about what does this look like if we take it out 5 years. And thanks, Steve.
Yep.
And this is a potential expansion proposal. So 2020 has the 3BD, and then lighting up the fiber through the existing access points. 2021, Boulder Junction Northeast is another 500 total it's 507 living units. It'd be a bit less because some of that would be addressed in that downtown project. But this area is our second highest density, second to the downtown area. And then we have these areas like the northwest, the west, the southeast that are terribly underserved. Well, if we're not gonna do this all in one year, we gotta figure out how to do those. And as Steve alluded, and we keep using this southeast. We've got 60 odd residents. This is the Man Lake, Muscalon, Little John area. And it's over $600,000 just to get it there. Now, what that part of the project would do is give us some redundancy. Not the total redundancy we would really love to have, but it gives the town of Boulder Junction some redundancy. So 2022, 2023, we have the west and the deep south, and then 2024 would be catch-up, cleanup, and punch list. And as we look at these projects, it's not uncommon to have a year like that. So this is a potential multi-year project. But note, as Steve said, we have been told that there are additional federal funds coming, probably in 2022. So do you wait for those funds to help, offset some of the costs? At the end of the day, it's still our money, no matter how you slice it. So if this project is important to us to bring high-speed broadband to the town, then we have to figure out the most economic way to do it.
But each one of those subsequent years is additional investment.
Yes, and as you wisely pointed out, if it's 7.5 doing it all at once in 2020, by the time you get to 2024, 8.5, that's just the economics of things. All right, we did talk about some of this already, but this part is important. And it has to do with the PSC grant. As we discussed, $24 million in 2020, $24 million in 2021. That we know. That's been approved in the budget. Can budgets change? Yeah, maybe they can, but that's probably pretty firm. Beyond that, who has a good crystal ball in here? Because we don't know. We think that this area has bipartisan support and will continue to be a priority from a funding standpoint throughout the United States, but you don't know what the future is going to bring. If we would go with an $800,000 grant, which, would be on the high end, but we were told yesterday that they feel that this coming year they may have 1 or 2 projects that will be north of $1 million. Okay, so that was good information. If it'd be 800,000, that's 3.3%. Somebody asked about, how do we feel? I think we're in pretty good shape. We've really made an impact in Madison. We have put our best foot forward. The grant application tells the story. They score that. That grant application is absolutely essential. So if we're going to go with it, CenturyLink will take the lead on submitting that grant. But if you're going to support this project, we absolutely are going to be intimately involved with writing that grant, because that story is critical. Partnerships, I'm going to talk about that more in a moment. We've already talked about the 50%, and we've discussed that. So let's, your support. In August, we talked about your support in the form of letters. Letters supporting this project. And we've worked with Sherry and Teresa Smith on creating those letters and getting methods to get those out to you, creating a template, making it as easy as possible. But guess what? It's not going to stop there, because we learned yesterday that the letters are just a start. In order for them to to say that their grant was successful, the supplier needs to benefit, because at the end of the day, you know, if they plow fiber to our residents and we don't take the service, who really benefits? Not much. Nobody really benefits much. So it's important, if we get to the point where we're gonna do these projects, that you support the project by signing up for the service. Most of us, it seems like a no-brainer, but in some communities, people don't. People don't. Great.
Did CenturyLink come back with a minimum requirement in terms of contracts?
As far as subscribers?
Yeah.
They did not. You know, they're concerned because what they see is a fairly low take rate. And we learned yesterday that kind of the max projects for fixed wireless, which is a different technology, is about 30%. So, you know, we talk about making that business model in these areas, in these rural areas. That's the reason why companies aren't investing their own money. It's because people are kind of agnostic about taking that service. So the success is really upon each and every one of our shoulders. We'll leave you with this, and then we're going to get to your feedback. You know what the cost is of doing nothing? That's kind of what we're left with. I don't know what that cost is. We have a lot of data to show that high-speed broadband provides economic stimulus for areas. If we don't do anything, I don't know. Don't know what it looks like. Okay, as we mentioned, you know, we've looked at a lot of options. Steve mentioned we've got a lot of data. We need some feedback from you. And as Dennis said in the stakeholder engagement, you're critical. You are absolutely critical. So we have a short survey that we want to send out and have each of you fill out and put in this box. And it has 3 options. One option, or option 1, is to install fiber optic high-speed broadband throughout the entire Boulder Junction Township in 2020. And that price tag, the total price tag, excluding supplier contributions and grant funding, is $7.5 million or thereabout. Option 2 is to install the fiber optic broadband only in that shaded area, that downtown Boulder Junction area, and add 28 access points to the existing fiber optic cable. Option 3 means that you don't support investing in broadband in Boulder Junction. Great.
Does 2 also include the 5-year plumbing? Or is it
It would, well, if our goal is to provide fiber to every living unit, yes. Now, what we showed, that would need some more work. And there are other options that we can explore. Fixed wireless has some capability. I mean, yes.
Just a real quick question on the funding. Are there other options besides property taxes that have been looked at, or additional room taxes, things like that, local room tax? To offset the.
Yes, there's been some discussion about looking at other funds, and that. Dennis, maybe you want to talk about this now to kind of springboard to what our next steps are.
Our immediate next steps are, we plan on having more meetings in the beginning of November. Within the first week or so of November, where we hope to have even more details about the project, with the goal that on November the 12th at 6:30, I believe the town is going to have their electors meeting to approve the levy. And at that meeting, I believe that there is going to be an advisory vote on this topic to be presented at that time. So what we're doing today is leading towards that. With regards to funding, I believe the town is exploring every possible option on funding a project. But they need to hear from the constituents what the constituents' feelings really are about this. Is your feeling we shouldn't have high-speed internet? Let the town know that. Or is your feeling we should bring it all in 1 year and whatever the cost? Or should we do it in stages that reduces the burden so that it's shared in a number of years? Greg, you know the road project was what, a 4-year project? 2-year project? 2-year project, okay. So it went over 2 years, so everyone did not get their road in year 1. The cost is going to be shared over a number of years. But I believe that the town is exploring every option on funding. Hope that helps.
Yeah. No, thank you.
And that's really, that's where we're at. So, you know, how do you pay for things? There are many, many different ways to pay for things, but at the end of the day, you know, somebody's got to pay the piper if you want to hear the music. And that's where we're at. There are benefits to hearing the music. There are definitely benefits to having high-speed broadband in Boulder Junction, because if we would put high-speed broadband here, there are very few places that look like us who have it in the state. Bayfield is one of those areas. Florence County seems to have done a reasonable job. You mentioned Trepolo. If you could spend a little time with us after, I'd like to hear more about that. You know, we're already on the map, and that's a good thing. This would just elevate where we are on the map. Now, marketing is really important to complete those goals. Great.
Well, if this is feedback, then one of the subjects that the road committee dealt with in proposing the road was, so do we go for just 20 miles of road, or do we do all the roads? Ultimately, the proposal that was put together and presented was all of them, because all the taxpayers were going to end up footing the bill for it. So your options here, you might want to consider possibly looking at a third, and that being, instead of just 1 year or, you know, just the downtown, what would be that 5-year plan? Because you could maybe do a little bit of a picture of what that might cost over 17 years, but it might be something the committee might want to take a look at. Because then at least you're throwing something out there for all taxpayers to give consideration to, that they too will share in the benefit. Otherwise, it's going to be just maybe the downtown.
Can I speak to that point? I'm sorry, Matt.
Did I misunderstand it?
It's not the downtown
Well,
only.
yeah.
Greg, our commitment is to serve the entire town. That's the goal. Let there be no mistake about that. That is the goal, to serve the entire town. And if the town had $7.5 or $8 million that was available, that would happen next year. But in order to serve the entire town, possibly, it may require that to be done over several years. This proposal says this is what is proposed for 2020, but our grant application to the state will say these are the other areas that will follow. You can only ask, your grant application is going to ask for $1 amount. Is your application going to ask for $4 million? What are your odds of receiving the $4 million? If you don't get the $4 million, is the town going to do the project anyway in 2020? All of those considerations need to be weighed, Greg. So this proposal is a multi-year proposal to accomplish fiber to the premises in every living unit in our town. Pardon me.
And
Go ahead.
I don't think it's an apples to apples comparison if you're comparing a road improvement project for the entire township of Boulder Junction to economic development plan with broadband, where you're going to expand tax revenue base by expanding your broadband downtown. You're going to increase revenue within the town. You're going to ensure that the town's revenue is going to be sustainable and hopefully increase. We won't have 5 to 10 empty business fronts downtown over that 5-year period. So even though you might be part of that 51% who's not receiving broadband immediately, you are absolutely, through property tax or your property value going up, through the economic development of the downtown, and those people that are going to be moving in, chances are they're going to be moving in from more urban areas, and they're not going to be looking to live out on Muskellunge Lake. They're going to be looking to live on Blueberry Lane, where they can walk downtown to this thriving new downtown area. That's, in my mind, when you're looking at multiple years and slow expansion to the outreaches, that everybody is going to be gaining that benefit. I don't think it's the same as, well, I still got a crappy, North Kirk Road is still crappy. That doesn't have the same economic detriment as this project would have advancement for the people. Yeah, it may take you 3 or 4 years to get it, but the people that are going to be living that far out of town, there's reasons that you choose to not live downtown also. And so I do understand that it is 51% that won't be seeing the benefit of this immediately by receiving the broadband, but they absolutely will be receiving the benefit of a continually thriving downtown and growing downtown area. I mean, that's the point of this, right?
That's the
It's to
point.
increase our tax base.
Exactly.
By attracting people with higher incomes through, virtual technologies. That's gonna help everybody.
Well, and a lot of times that's done in townships like us through an industrial park, because that helps keep the tax base down then for the residents. But I just want to go back to your point, Greg, because whatever we do, if we concentrate on this 2020 downtown and fiber access point project, that's got to be part of a bigger plan, because when we file our grant application, they're going to want to know what's the big picture. And that's what we need to do.
So well said, completely agree. I was just looking for the other piece. It wasn't obvious on the back.
Okay.
That's all.
Yep.
Yeah, so Dennis, just to be clear, so option 2 really says, we're doing it for the whole township. Phase 1 is the downtown project.
You're absolutely right.
Okay, I wish you would have said that.
Yeah, that was my concern.
Okay.
We're doing the best we can.
Yeah.
We're unpaid volunteers.
And that's good input. Thank you for that. All right, let's go to you.
So, what would be the likelihood that if you did your 4 or 5 year project, and you put in, and technology is improving all the time, you put in the new stuff downtown, and then 4 years ago, you get out to the northern, edges of the towns, or the township, and it doesn't play nice with the older equipment. You're gonna have nice, have newer, fiber optics, newer technology out there, but it's not going to, be compatible with what has been established 4 years ago in town.
Yeah, there are really 2 technologies in this space. This EPON equipment that Steve talked about, that's kind of industry standard. GPON, I got ahead of myself. It's GPON equipment, which is industry standard, and then something that's a little bit older, not used as much, is called EPON. And EPON is really designed for these symmetrical things, so it's more businessy. This is the technology that's used for covering mainly residential areas. We don't have a crystal ball, but these telco companies, they're professional in making sure that their stuff talks to each other. 5 years out, would it change in that period of time? I don't know. This light, using light waves to transmit data, that I read about from MIT, that seemed kind of out there. And there's really nothing else on the horizon as we're talking here today in 2019.
I think it rains too much here.
Well, see, and it snows too, you know, it snows in Boston, so maybe that's off the chart. Yes.
At this time, CenturyLink is the only one that has a lease with the town to lay any telephone lines or that. If another company came in, would they relinquish that because they still would have landlines, or would that be an additional?
And that's a really good, very perceptive question. The telephone industry was deregulated back in the late 80s, something like that. So at that time, you know, I don't even know, it was one of the bells was here, and this was their territory. After deregulation, anybody could come in to any other area. The challenge is that the big guys and gals, they don't like come on to territories too often. So that those territories that were set up during regulation are still kind of held to. Now, what we see is that the smaller players, they will come in and they will penetrate those areas because they're a different type of business. You know, often they're more agile. The other option, so let me just step back and say that CenturyLink hasn't been particularly forthcoming with a lot of their information, about their infrastructure. And they've told us that they don't share that because of two things: security issues, it's critical infrastructure, and it's confidential information. Okay? Some companies do lease their fiber to other companies. Okay? That is a possibility. Now, it doesn't seem like CenturyLink is open to that type of thing, but other companies do that. So there's no mandate to say that another supplier can't come in here and plow fiber. Those days are gone. Does that help? Okay. Who had another question? Somebody had a question? Julie?
New building, I think I brought, I don't remember how we answered that last time. When people are building new houses and you're eventually wanting to get it into everybody's house, what is that gonna entail exactly, technically? Relaying another line, I mean, paying the light, how does that work?
Yeah, CenturyLink said, you know, we talked about that too. We don't want it to be an administrative nightmare for the town either, right? So once this is done, we'd like it to kind of take care of itself. So CenturyLink said that the model is there throughout the country, that if somebody wants to do it and they're within 600 feet of an access point, they can get hooked up with them. They told me that yesterday because we were concerned with that too.
Right.
So it would be the same parameters that we're working with now.
So if you're building a new home, as long as you're within 600 feet.
Exactly.
They give you a per foot estimate if you have to pay for your own installation.
Up to $2.
How
So say
much?
$1.50 a foot-ish.
A symmetrical fiber?
That is that's a good question because it's, if you think about it, there's also going to be places that maybe there's 5 or 6 homes somewhere, and they say, well, we want to get fiber from an access point there and we'll pay for it. Is that different fiber than the fiber that's run to a single home? And there's different fibers, I don't know that, but a buck to $2 is what they told me for running a fiber to a home.
Yeah, I think your question was, is it symmetrical? Like, let's say you wanted to have 250 up and down,
Yes.
you'd have that business package.
Yes.
The fiber is the fiber.
Okay.
So it's really, you know, how they flip your switch. It's no, you know, they don't flip switches anymore. It's
And
all software.
the gig residential is symmetrical. So if you have the gig service, which is $85 a month.
Oh, that's right, the gig service
The
is
gig is-
symmetrical.
Okay, so yeah, I was looking at just saying.
Yeah, the gig is symmetrical.
And Bill, this PowerPoint is on the town website
It's on the town website.
already, so everyone can look at it.
And the presentation from this morning
Is on the town website too? Or on the library?
Library.
On the library YouTube.
Oh, okay, Dan.
Well, I think, you said something early on about 50 students who are in the, at least I think in the downtown
That's right.
area. And I think that as you present this to people throughout the town, the whole concept of our youth is extremely important. And, you know, we talk about new businesses coming in and so forth, but I can picture a new business coming in and trying to find somebody to come in here, and they've got 2 children, 3 children, and they look at homes and find out there's no internet available for my kids coming in from Madison or from Minneapolis or some other part of the country. That's a huge detriment. It's one thing when your kids aren't happy when they come for 2 weeks in the summertime and they can't be watching as much TV as they'd like, but it's quite another when they can't accomplish schoolwork. And I think one other thought to that is, as you look at, if you end up with a 2-stage program, and you now have part of the student base living in an area where they have this access, and part of the students who don't have that, it would be nice if the town could provide something, for example, longer hours at the library here, where those students who don't have it at home could come in and have access to that high speed in the evening.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because communities have opened up places, you know, like storefronts for that type of thing. You know, call them internet cafes, if you will. So that's a really good point. But if Brent Jaliski with the North Lakeland Elementary School were here, he would tell you that they have had families who have not located to Boulder Junction or within the school district because they couldn't get appropriate high-speed broadband for their children. So that's something that he's experienced. And I think, if I remember right, they have had folks, a couple of families who have left as well. So that's real, that's happening today. Any last burning questions before we close?
I would just remind, go ahead.
To sort of far look out of everything, what's the plan as far as trying to bring businesses in and also just trying to educate the public about different streaming services, how to sign up for that?
It's a really important piece because that gets us to our goals. Want to address that?
Sure, well, our Economic Development Connect Communities Committee will be addressing that. But first, we need to know what we're selling. That's the whole key. We can't sell something if we're not going to get it. So we need to know what the project is. But we've been reviewing that for several months now, how to market it, how to roll it out. And we would, if you have any advice on that, we'd appreciate your advice and recommendations, and if you care to join us, we're more than welcome for more volunteers.
Okay, if you drop your surveys in this box, thank you very much for coming and spending your evening with us.
November the 12th.